Thank you for joining me for the When Women Speak web series, sponsored and brought to you by Life on Power Enterprises. My name is Shirley Kay, and I will be your host for the When Women Speak web series. This is inaugural day, the first episode of the When Women Speak series, and I'm excited that you are joining me on today. Today is just you and I. This show will have some amazing women and men on this show because I think hearing about the values and the voices of women from the two perspectives, I think it adds value to all of us. And the women that are scheduled for this show, as in the men that are scheduled for this show, are absolutely amazing. You want to tune in every Wednesday at 11 a.m. for the When Women Speak web series. It will be released every Wednesday at 8:11 a.m. So why When Women Speak web series? I was prompted to do this and began to do some research a little while ago, and I was asked to, about a year ago actually, when I was asked to respond to a paper that talked about the inequitable behavior that occurs in the room when we women, really whether you're a woman of color or you're not a woman of color, women, when we get invited in the room and we don't have we don't have equal talking time, we're interrupted often, and those things occur. That really most people kind of to shake off their shoulders. Now, let's be clear. With 20 plus years in HR, I understand and I know that we all show up every day with biases based on our experiences, not always because we feel a certain way about any type of group. But we show up with our experience, with all of our experiences, right? And that's what creates our biases. So it's not the biases that concern me. It is the ability for women to respond to the treatment that concerns me. So we're going to, in this show, we're going to talk about that. The different ways that women are find their voice, the different ways that women lead with their voice, and the different ways that women leave with their voice. And even that, based on the guest, is going to be some variations of the meanings of that. So let's begin. Some of the inquiries that I'll be talking about is what does it mean when you actually hear their statement about finding her voice? And finding her voice means that she begins to unapologetically show up within her value, not the values of the organization that she's working for within her career, not the values of anyone else that she's in a relationship with. She's showing up within her values, those values that propel her to be able to be the best version of herself in all types of relationships, whether she's the owner of a business, she's in a relationship, she has a senior level position, mid level position, or just a role in another organization. She begins to show up simply unapologetically within her values. Our guest will be asked the question, have you ever had a voiceless experience? And I'm really interested in hearing the responses of our guests because even our men will be asked that question. Have you ever had a voiceless experience? Because we all have had it in one way or the other, but for women in their careers and in their business, I believe that it's a tad bit different because we're already kind of behind the eight ball, right? We didn't show up at the table. We really did have to be invited to that table. Although we deserve to be there, that's why we were invited. We have to sometimes understand that our voice matters, but not today, not in this conversation. But unfortunately, that happens more often than we want it to happen. Not today, and not in that conversation. We like to believe that we're going to contribute regardless. That's what we like to believe. But not all the time are we just able to. Because our contribution, we don't want it to distort the room, the conversation, the atmosphere in that room. So we would often make the decision to be voiceless just for a moment until we create some type of strategy to come back and contribute. But even having to do that, right? Needing to create a strategy in order to contribute. Wow. When our counterparts just show up and contribute. And why should the voices of women and their values matter? Well, if you don't believe anything else, then let's just be clear. Studies show that when senior leadership includes at least 30% of women, those are most often the top performing companies. Why does her values matter? Her values matter because that's authentically who she is. So when you invite us to the table, but the organization, the collaboration, the project, whatever it is, the expectation is that you're getting talent. There's an individual that houses that talent, but you are inviting talent to that table. So that results in whatever those goals, those end results goals, that you have a good idea those goals will be met. That's what you're inviting to the table. And without her values, you don't get all of that. She shows up, giving you some of that talent, but there's no trust there because she can't show up in her authentic self, right? So if there's no trust there, you're not getting her whole gamut of what she has to offer, the whole gamut of what you heard about her, the whole gamut of what you've seen her already do. You're not getting it if she can't show up voiceful and full of her values. Man, I'm going to be asking guests to share experiences of them leading with their voice, using their voice to lead. Because sometimes you just have to do what needs to be done when you have the impact and the influence in order to do so. The scary part of it is that it's not enough of us that has enough impact or influence in order to do that. But when we get there, what do you do? Can you share some experiences leading with your voice? One specific one that I share often is when I got the opportunity to have a voice at the career development table, making decisions on high potentials and the next person and who's next, etc. That is when I can really say I really use my voice. Because you see, sometimes when the only woman in the room supports, the only woman that shows up on the screen, it looks like it's intentional because it is. Nope, she may not have been the best one, but there are plenty of mediocre individuals that were being recommended. The only difference is that she was a mediocre woman sometimes, and sometimes she was a bad A woman that had exactly what we need. But often, skills were no more nor less than the other folks that were being recommended. So, yes, it looked intentional because it was. I'm going to be asking guests, what does the statement leaving with your voice convey? Because it sounds like, we just went through what was coined the she session. That's what we just went through, right? Women left of all different socioeconomic statuses and for various reasons. Because majority of the women, the folks that are taking care of children and families, they are women. So some left not because it was their choice. They had to take care of families in the middle of a pandemic. Because I read the stories, I saw a couple of the documentaries, and the shares of women talking about why they left. And then there were those that left while they were building. I think the number was about 2 million businesses, no, 200,000 businesses a week, somewhere in there, of women owned businesses that were created during the pandemic. So it's easy to believe that when I talk about leaving with your voice, I'm talking about physically leaving, but not so. The one thing that, if nothing else, we can do is that we leave without leaving. And most often, you're not recognizing that her contribution has changed. So physically, she might still be there, but by choice, she has become voiceless. So leaving with her voice doesn't always mean that she's leaving physically. Quite often means that if my values, my voice, and my contributions don't matter, then you're only going to get this much of me. You know, if you're listening to this and you have that impact and influence in your organization and you hear that, but you're struggling with some things, and you have some talented people at the helm, and you still don't understand why you're struggling, ask the question. Ask a hard question. One of the things I like to ask is what happened to you? Some of the most difficult relationships I've had with folks that I'm either managing, working with, or sometimes I am reported to the individual. That question usually invokes authentic conversation. Okay, you don't want to use that question, right? Ask, what can we do to support you? Do you feel comfortable contributing with your colleagues? And then why not? And then listen. There's not a way for you to provide a reason why she doesn't feel like she can contribute. That's her reason. So, your job after asking a hard question is to listen. Come closer. Now, if you have no desire to do anything about what she says, then I'm going to ask you to continue to deliver at subpar rates without all of her talent, without all of her talent. The last thing that we'll be asking our guests, and sometimes these questions may not even get asked as they're getting, as I am addressing them today, because the conversations are going to be amazingly authentic. And because they're going to be just that authentic, you'll hear the answer in the conversation, which is why when women speak, you'll be able to go back to it, whether you're on LinkedIn, you're on the YouTube for Life on Power or Shirley King, or you're on the business page for Shirley King on Facebook. You'll be able to go back and you'll be able to view the past episodes. But my last words of advice in 2022, one day after we have celebrated International Women's Day, is to have enough courage to do something you have never done before. Sometimes it doesn't have to be big. Sometimes it just means that you're going to ask a question. Sometimes it takes courage to include a question like that in your employee engagement index, because then you got to see the answer to the question. Then you might have to do something about it. But if you plan on doing nothing about it, then I say again, continue to producing subpar goals without everyone fully showing up with all of their talent. This is the inaugural edition of When Women Speak web series. Thank you for joining me for episode number 1. And join me every Wednesday at 11 a.m. with one of my amazing guests. Thank you for joining me. See you next Wednesday.